So this is something funny that I've been noticing since the recent globe update. We're seeing the globes are actually reversed, and I'll fix that probably in the next update coming out soon. A little bit annoying, but hopefully have that fixed out soon. Another feature that was added in one of the recent updates is this map table feature, which lets you kind of zoom down into right there at the terrain level. And I've got a default set for how the terrain looks based on elevation data. I'll probably let you add some sliders to let you change that on your own, so that you could have mountains that look taller or smaller based on those sliders. Here I've just imported, again, a map of the world, and we're using the relief map mode. One of the cool things with the new feature that lets you fly around here is that you can actually just change the map mode to whichever one you want, and then use that for both the global map and the map table map. So here we've got the temperature map of the globe, and then you can also go back into the map table and zoom around some more. I've really been enjoying this feature. Flat map mode, this is kind of an underused mode, but one of the first ones that I added because I was thinking about using it for flat maps for games, and being able to overlay that. Works out okay. It definitely needs some work. I think we could use probably what the paper map uses, so go over to the paper map here. Well, you can't see it right now because the paper map at this resolution won't do it, but basically have mountains and trees and everything drawn right there onto the flat map. I think that would make for a much better looking map. It's definitely on my to-do list here. I'm going to reset so I can show that paper map mode and what I'm talking about. So here we have the paper map mode where you can actually see the mountains and the trees. Zoom in some here for a better look at it. So if we had better icons that weren't hand-drawn by me, and then program a way to make sure that you can zoom in and out of that at the larger scale resolution, I think that'll be really cool. We've got the 4096 by 2048, probably too big for the stream. We'll go down to 2048. But again, if we could have this resolution, but with those same details from the paper map, but just better drawings, I think that would make a big improvement for the generator. Go back to our wrap mode here. You can see even with the paper map mode, you can go into that map table mode and zoom all around the generator. Or go over to the globe, which I know I've shown in some of my prior videos. One of the things that I've needed to do for a long time is really to turn back to some of the performance issues that we've been seeing with the generator. So I know that, say, importing titles, it's something that I started work on, and I got distracted to other things. So like the Empire map, the Kingdom map, Duchy map, I know I get a lot of complaints on that front. So for all you CK3 players who are using the generator, know that that is on my list, both from the performance side and from trying to make this an easier approach. We do have this title map painter, which I know everybody's seen before, but you can go over and brush in your title map. Just press tab to switch between colors. You'll see that it's coloring in whatever the title is. And then if I zoom back out here, let me go back to wrap, you'll see on the side we've got those titles coming in and being filled in. Here we have the Ulma Ulmond Empire, you can click into the Ulmond Empire, change their localized title to whatever you wanted it to be if you're a CK3 player. So we'll say the Northwest Isle. I don't know, that's a really lazy name for an island, but it works. Northwest Isle Empire there, here on this northwest side of the map. I don't think, switched the title maps yet to where they will project out to the globe. I'm going to try that real fast. Yeah, no, that doesn't work. So that's on my to-do list to fix that, where the title maps will project over to the globe too. We also have the roguelike map mode, and I don't think that projects either, so it's not going to show up actually at this scale, or at least not correctly. Probably need to restart the generator here to get the lower scale map. Let's see. Yeah, you can kind of see it here, but it's really just kind of muddled and colored in instead of actually being the roguelike approach. Let me go ahead and restart the generator. I'm going to do a lower res map that'll show the roguelike map mode. Still working on that. I think I'll be able to get those better for the better resolution maps too, but there we go. There is the roguelike map mode. Needs some work on the colors. That's something I've been thinking about recently, is trying to improve all of the colors involved here. It's a little bit too dark for my taste, so one of the things I was doing was trying to highlight the elevation difference through the colors in the same way that, say, the pixel or colorful map mode does. But I don't think that it really does its job. It's just, as you get farther out, you zoom out, it all just kind of bleeds and gets too dark. So that one's on my list, something that needs to be corrected over time. Let's see. Oh, we were going to test whether the roguelike map mode will project out to the globe. Let's see. Nope, does not project out to the globe yet. So definitely something to keep an eye on. We'll be working on that to make sure that that projects correctly. So we have the paper, the roguelike, and then I'm sure the culture and faith map modes, title maps, those aren't projecting correctly. This is the new, and I did not switch the icons out. I'll do that in a hotfix here, but this is the new overmap feature where you can actually just import an image into the generator, and I thought that people might be interested if you had a map that you'd created in another program and you wanted to just see what it would look like, either projected on the globe or through the map explorer approach, the fly around approach, that you could go in and do this import. And it's just this, under the import tab, you click import overmap, and then you can just click, I guess it's probably not showing up here, but you just click on any map that you want to bring into there. So say I want to bring in an annual precipitation map. Go back and click the overmap tab, and then that's going to be brought in as a map for an overmap, and you can put it on a globe and escape here, or you can put it over on the map table. Now with this overmap approach, I'm just zeroing out all the elevations because I don't know what images you're going to be using or what the incoming data is, but I think it's kind of fun just to be able to fly around your own maps. I'm going to use it with a different approach here. I'm actually going to upscale to, let's say, 2048 by 1024. Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's a fun one I just put in. I'm really enjoying it, KZ. It's say if I wanted to do this is use this as an example over on the Discord, but here's the Caves of Cud map. If I wanted to import that and use it as the overmap, and then I can pull that up on the map table and fly around the Caves of Cud map, which is kind of fun. Not really sure what else to do with this feature. It doesn't really have, I mean, other than for people who just are using the procedural map generator for whatever other mapping purposes, that they can do it to be able to see their maps either as a globe or to be able to fly around their maps. But beyond that, I really doesn't have much use. It's just kind of a fun new addition. Of course, I don't take any responsibility over what you might load into these into the map generator here, but you could also load in. I've got let's see. Oh, I've been working on the ocean currents recently, and I could just load it in as an overmap to show those off. So generating ocean currents and wind patterns, this has been a real pain for the last several weeks trying to work through this. But basically you can see the equator and the intertropical convergence zone. You have winds coming in. There's actually a cell right here I think you can see. Really not really a realistic place for that cell, just off the coast of this continent, but bringing up cold winds from the south, cold currents from the south, and then as it's coming back down from the equator, bringing warm currents along the coast here. Over here you have kind of the same thing, but on the west side, so those currents that are coming down, you have the cold currents coming up. This has been a really, really tough nut to crack, and part of it is that, well, ocean currents are easy, or at least semi-easy. It's really kind of working through the effect of wind patterns on the continents and the effect on precipitation. Not really a ton on temperature, but the effect of precipitation. And the ultimate goal here is to try to get a Köppen climate classification generator, so bringing in the wind patterns, bringing in that temperature, the precipitation, and trying to get that generator put in place. I have the code for it, and it's working on the back end in the sense that it will classify climates and it'll classify them appropriately. It does it according to the classifications, but actually making it where the precipitation is correct is the hard thing. Yes, so the map does generate ocean floor topography, and I can show you that. Let me see if I'm going to reset the generator here, KZ, and I'll generate a new world, and I'm going to upscale it to, let's say, over to 2048 again, because I think that will probably stream better. This one, actually, I don't know. So this one doesn't. This is one of the new ways that I've added for a noise-based approach, and the noise here, it actually kind of darkens out. But if you go just to the old school style of generation, let me go back to that. And that's probably something I need to correct. You can actually kind of see it in the coloring here on the color map. But then if I go over to the height map, and go down to the map table, you can see it somewhat. Not as much as I would like, and I apologize. I think I've had kind of two different generation approaches over the course of the map generator, and one of them is this one that starts up when you start up the generator. So that's just this basically approach where it spreads out from these spreading centers, as I call them. It's not super realistic, but you have these spreading centers that kind of go down the map, and they zigzag, they cross out, and from those randomly you have, I call it magma generation, but you have basically, I mean, it's not any kind of really realistic tectonic plate simulator or anything, but it's just spitting out elevation from those points, and that elevation is getting spread out across the map in a pretty semi-random way. And so that's this approach. That's the one that you see when you first load up the generator. But if you go in and you click in either to change the resolution of the map, or you go into this random map approach, you're going to see a different approach that's more a very simple noise-based approach. And it's something that I need to revisit in the future. Here you kind of have hot points for elevation, and you have some chances and some noise-based approach to elevation spread from there. So you can see it's really two different approaches. A lot of people who use the generator actually use it for importing their own elevations. So they'll import through the height map import function, and you can put a multiplier there to see what the for each cell that's coming in, what the whiteness of the cell is. You can multiply it by whatever amount. So say I multiply it by 4, and I want to import a height map, and I have one that's kind of an upside down USA map. Um, a lot of people just find that easier. They either have a height map from another source or from another map editor that they like to put in there, and they find that easier than kind of working on a map long term in the browser. But you can go either way. Since let's see, do you plan on adding more realistic map generation? So what priority does that have compared to other features? Yeah, I do plan on adding more realistic map generation. There are some obstacles involved because I'm working only in the browser. I'm working in really vanilla JavaScript for most of this vanilla JavaScript and on Canvas, and that you just have some bottlenecks from the performance standpoint on things like tectonics and other things that you really need to downscale with. And so one of the things that I've been working through, say on the wind generation side, and I'm going to bring back up that wind map that I had earlier. Let's see, where did it go? This is the ocean current map, but it's also got the wind. Okay, so one of the things that I've been thinking through on the wind generation side and the ocean current generation side is doing this kind of downscaling where we have even for this higher resolution map, you can see that the arrows here for the wind patterns are actually much larger. And it's given okay results, but on the wind generation side, uh, it's led to when I'm trying to simulate out precipitation and some of the influences of, say, continentality on temperature, that it's making it look somewhat unrealistic where you have a higher resolution map and you have these lower res blockiness, right, to the temperature map, and that's something I want to avoid. So, yes, I do plan on adding more realistic map generation. I'm working on it on various fronts, whether it be the height maps or on the wind, on the climate. But I'm also just butting up against the constraints of the browser and some of those performance bottlenecks. I have some people helping on that on the performance side, and hopefully over time that's going to improve. Um, and I've been trying to do some refactors of the code over the last several weeks to bring that performance up, but every step forward is a couple of steps back. So still working on it. Thanks for the question. Um, is there anything specifically that you're looking for? Any more um, realistic features or something that you would like to see in the map generator? Feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm happy to try to prioritize what the community is into, what they want. And I know that you probably see the updates coming through and you think, wow, he goes after a lot of random stuff. And I do. I just kind of go after whatever's interesting me at the time. I'll switch out of this one into another mode here. Let's see if this will come up. It's a good question. So the globe is it does. I mean, you still have all of the elevation data for it. Um, I can actually. One of the things that I tried originally was to include that elevation data and kind of project it onto the globe and have the globe be the spiky, have the mountains coming up from the globe, and it just looked really weird. But yes, I think you could use it to project daylight. You could probably use it to see shadowed areas if it's something people are interested in. There's definitely a lot of features I think that could be added to the globe. Um, right now, it was just kind of proof of concept, and you see that really in the sense that I think it's projecting backwards. So I said earlier on the stream, I'm going to try to fix that soon. It's projecting maps in backwards. But yeah, we could definitely add more features, and I want to in the near future on that. and that's, you know, one of the struggles that I have, and I was soloing this for a long time primarily. I've had some help recently on various things, but one of the struggles that I have is that my interests have waned and gone in different directions at different points. So you'll see I'm just hitting on different topics. Like this 3D fly around map was just a crazy idea I had the other night and tried to implement, and I thought it came out with pretty good results. But really, they're in the same way that I hear everybody say CK3 needs a curator team. I think, in a sense, that I need to come back and curate a lot of these features that I've been adding and make sure that they're working as intended, and working through some of the bugs that have been included. Like I know that people are having problem with culture and faith mapping. I know people are having problems with province mapping, and a lot of my interests are more on the generator side, and for those people who are using the generator for CK3 purposes, I need to turn back and address some of those features in more detail and work through some of those bugs. Um, and I don't really know. I mean, I haven't gotten a lot of feedback from the community on what what's the breakdown really of people who are using it for CK3 versus people who just enjoy it as a map generator. I think it's probably heavily skewed towards the CK3 side because that's how the whole idea was born. But really, I've been trying to make it more of a general purpose generator recently. So addressing things like Tugaruga asked about, so more realistic map generation, trying to bring in features that I think people would like that fly around map or the globe map. One of my favorite things, honestly, with the globe map, I just like doing the little paper maps and watching those spin around. I could do that for hours or put it onto music and watch it. Really enjoy that. I've also wondered whether people have understood the color coding of the paper maps. Just on first glance, not, of course people are going to understand what maps they're working from, but whether they see it as the, when it's on the globe, as the white being the land and the gray being the sea. I've had a lot of feedback on that. Another thing I noticed recently is that our water province mapping has broken. You'll see here I'm drawing, I guess, terrain over water, and if I switch over to the brush and I try to do a water province, it's not working. So that's something that I need to turn back to this week and try to get it fixed too. Oh, great. Yeah, good. I'm glad to see. Glad that people are seeing that. I was hoping so. Yeah, the white is land and gray is sea on the paper map. Let's see. I'm trying to get into the temperature map here, but I think the temperature map came out really well. That's something that I worked on for a while alongside the wind, and will be incorporated into the Köppen climate classifier, which then will get translated into the terrain map generator for CK3. So here it's actually skewed because the equator is so low on this map. If I bring the equator up, and then that intertropical convergence zone should, let's see, what kind of map do I have right now? Oh, I've still got it down at the bottom. Say I put the equator at 600. That's going to bring the equator up in that intertropical convergence zone right around here with that heavier, higher temperature, the elevation-based and latitude-based temperature distinctions here. I think they turned out really well. I think the color coding turned out really well. Could use some more gradation, but overall I feel pretty good about it, and don't plan to do much more on that front in the near future. And that one too can be projected over to the globe or projected out to the map table. Let's see. One of the things I was thinking about recently, so I have this relief map, and I don't know how many people are familiar with, say, old U.S. Geological Survey maps, but you have the elevation lines on them, and they have all sorts of markings on them, like for mines and other things. And I think that would be fun to have a map mode that has those, that actually has the elevation lines built in. So tectonics, yes, I've tried it in the past, and I would love to. I would love to somehow incorporate tectonics into the process. It is on my list. Uh, One of the things I struggled with, I think, is that as soon as we got that height map import process into the generator, that's what most people were using, and so as I thought about what to do and what made the most sense to work on at that point, when say 90% of people were using the height map importer, I thought it probably made sense to focus in on things that were more directly relevant to that. So things that would be applied to any imported map. But it's really something. I mean, I would love for the maps that are generated to be more realistic. I'd love for them to be something that's much more usable, even without having to import your own map, or having to import your own map and work on it from there. So yes, tectonics are on my list. Just an improved diversity of terrain generation is on my list. I mean, this is highly unrealistic when you actually look at what's going on, say, on the first blush of opening up and generating a new world. If you look at it with just a quick eye, you're like, okay, well, you've got islands, you've got some mountains and everything, but the way that spreading line process that I talked about earlier is working, where you have kind of these lines of elevation from which you have more elevation spreading out, you basically end up with these middle of island or middle of continent mountains, right? All of your elevation is coming up from the coast, and is almost always in the middle. And I can show it again here. I'll just generate a new world and show that same thing. So you lose a lot of very realistic terrain that way. You also don't have, and you don't have a lot of erosion features going on, right? And that's something that I've tried to address in the past, but again, is difficult from a performance standpoint. Yeah, yeah, very volcanic. A lot of volcanic islands and maybe mega continent, right? So on the erosion front, I've tried to address it in the past, say from the course of rivers when you do river generation. I also have added this brush in, and let me actually get. I'm just going to make a bunch of elevation here. Do a really stupid brush power, but 30. So I'm just going to make this bigger too. All right, there we go. Kind of a mess, but and then I'm going to use the erosion brush. The erosion brush is something, and you want to do that on a very low setting for the brush power, but it's something I added maybe a month or two ago, and it does an okay job. I mean, it's very liney in a sense, but especially kind of at this, that looks terrible actually. You can usually get a much better result. I'm gonna pull up a new one here. That one looked pretty dumb. But you can usually get a much better result from the erosion brush. Let's see if I can do this. I think it's just because I had those mountains way too big. There we go. Just throw in some elevation. Alright, and then I'm going to switch over to the erosion brush again, and I'm going to do it on 150, let's say. And you don't want to do too much. A little goes a long way. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and, I don't know, a lot of people probably don't know this, but there's a cleanup button. When you start to see, one of the things I do to avoid some of the performance issues of just redrawing the canvas over and over is when you're using the brushes, it's not doing a complete redraw everywhere else. And so you can actually clean up with this little cleanup cell, and that's going to redo your terrains and everything. But, it looks okay. It doesn't look great. It's not incredibly realistic, but it can get you where you need to go, or at least a little bit of the way if all you're wanting to do is work in the generator. I'm going to go ahead and throw a bunch in, and then I'm going to switch over to the map table, where it's probably going to look pretty silly, but just this very jagged terrain. But yeah, so yeah, kind of Badlandsy. Um, one of the thing, and I've had people say, hey, you should maybe think about switching over to a different language, or try something else to address the performance issues. I don't really have a ton of interest in that. I've been working in JavaScript for a long time, and its code base is built out on it. I've spent a lot of time on it, and just don't have the interest or wherewithal to go learn a new language for that purpose and to spend all that time rewriting the code. So, but it is open source, so if there's anybody out there who's really interested in doing that, it's under the unlicensed, so anybody can take up the code and use it as they will to make whatever product they want out of it. If you wanted to rewrite it in a different language or as a standalone program. One of the things I do like about the browser is that it's very accessible, very shareable, right? It's something that people can um, just get into without worrying about downloading something on their computer. So uh, really this started out as a toy project, something I was doing over the weekend, and working on not even related to CK3 at the time, but just to do a little map generator. And over time it's grown, and my interests have changed and grown. So uh, the project has evolved in a lot of ways, and it's if you look at the code base, it's a spaghetti code. It's a lot of one thing strapped on another thing on top of another thing on top of another thing, and you see that somewhat in the features too, right? And there's some features I think that could be removed or cleaned up. It's definitely on my list. Switch out here to a new map. You don't get awful results, I think, with this kind of generation. I mean, it's a little bit weird terrain-wise, but I do think it comes out okay. Comes out more believable than some things, and one of the things I really didn't want to do for a long time, and I pushed back against hard, was just going a full noise-based approach. And I know that it would be faster in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of sameness there. Sometimes terrain that's just less interesting, maps that are less interesting, and I thought that the way that this one evolved, it did give it some character that you didn't get in a noise-based map. Now you do have the difference though with the let's see, the when I did adopt this noise-based approach for those larger maps, you see um, some of the difference there. It still comes out pretty similar, but I agree. I mean, I do think it's usable. It does, KZ, I think it does give a baseline. People can adapt. But again, you have varying degrees of use here. You have some people who are just importing their maps and using those. So really it's finding the time based on knowing what the use case is, finding the time to go back and make this a better approach, make it a better generator. It's on my list. That's what I always say. It's on my list. Everything's on my list. Working with limited time and family and kids, always on my list. But I do think the new globe function and the fly around map function are really two of my favorite features of the generator so far. And going back to the idea of trying to do something that's things to make it a more general purpose generator, I think both of those serve that purpose really well. And the paper maps come out really cool as you get to the larger resolutions. One of the things I did recently, I actually took out the higher resolution because it wasn't working. People were seeing memory crashes when they were trying to create out for a CK3 map. But I think I might add that back in and just give a warning with it, because it actually, you can't see it now because I'm in the public version, but these paper maps, when you do them on the globe with the 8192 by 4096 with both map size and resolution, they come out looking really cool. I've also thought about maybe adding something, and I don't know how people would like this, but adding something to for the borders here. You can see, as the map's kind of drawn across the sphere, you see that point where there's a cutoff, which is fine with a lot of maps because most people, or a lot of people, won't put their maps right up to the edge of the map. But for those that do, maybe adding something for a mirroring, so that that last little bit is mirrored off, so that you would have it wouldn't just cut off abruptly there. Let's see. Like how the projection kind of gets distorted as you go around the map too. That's fun for the sphere. Another thing I'll need to turn back to at some point is river generation. I think it's still working for the lowest level map, but I don't think it's working necessarily outside of that. And there's just very specific requirements for the way that rivers are generated in Crusader Kings 3, which is, again, was the birthplace of this generator. Let me go ahead and I'm going to add some elevation to this map. Actually, I'm just going to import. I'll import over a world map, I guess. Okay, so yeah, so there are just some difficulties in the generation of river maps for CK3 that make rivers a little bit difficult to do, but it definitely, yeah, it's still working on that lowest level map, and you see, basically, I'll zoom in here to show, but for a CK3 river map, and it might confuse people who aren't using it for CK3, but it can't be orthogonally adjacent to another color, or to three of the same colors. I can't remember the exact, it's been a while since I've worked on the river maps. So you have these green, which is the start of the river system. And then you have the tributaries that are coming in and connecting at the red. And then it has to come out to the ocean. And I have to make sure that when you're doing that, so say if you're using, right here, I've got, 512 by 256 resolution with an 8192 by 4096 map. You're having to scale that up at the back end with the Python script that we provide, and scale that up. And so the river map is going to look like this. This will be the river map, but then all of the maps are scaled up. And so everything, when you still have the river coming in, say right here, it still has to kind of end perfectly. So for a long time, we fought with rivers that were ending too soon, or rivers that were going too far and then coming out. Like here, you might have the river not connect to the ocean, or it might go right through the ocean to the other side just because of the scaling issue. Worked on that a long time. I think we got that to a good solution. I don't know. I haven't heard from a lot of people on the river side yet with any problems. And it's been a while since I've done a generation all the way through. I think the last one I did was for the template. Because I've mainly been just working on generator features. Now there are all these weird rivers down in Antarctica, which is pretty funny. Nothing great, and I think if I were, doing this for, and it might be something I add in the future, is river generation not for CK3, right? Where you don't have all of these very specific requirements that go into a CK3 river, and you don't have the problems of how a CK3 river might look if you try to add in every river system, but instead have a generator that just generates rivers based on the topography and the elevation and changes. And that way people who are not using it for CK3 could have good river maps that they could, simulate erosion and deposition and some of the other features. Um, Probably put on the list at some point. I don't know that it's on there right now, but I think it's a good idea, something to add. These low res maps, they don't come out great in the sphere, but I might have to track down this bug too about the way that these are being displayed, because here you see that it's displayed correctly, but then another time you'll load the sphere up and it's not displayed correctly. Yeah, I think topo-based rivers would be good. I mean, I have all the code there to do it. Um, I have some constraints, like, so for the, because of the way that Crusader Kings 3 maps work, I have some constraints on it that prevent some very close river generation, because it just starts to look really weird in CK3 maps. But I think would look fine in the generator itself, especially if you're dealing with, you know, 1 pixel at a time, or maybe a little bit more. I think it would look fine. Now, performance-wise, rivers are a huge pain. Again, talking about using JavaScript and the browser-based approach, you really run into a lot of bottlenecks with rivers. And it's not bad, say, at this lower resolution, but the higher you get, the longer you'll be waiting and the harder it's going to be. So you'll hear it over and over from me, but you bump up against performance issues very frequently, and I feel like half of my work is an uphill battle against the constraints of the medium that I've chosen, right, of doing this in browser. Um, and I'm talking to people about ways to try to improve that, whether it's from the storage side or the performance side. Put this over on the paper map. So I do enjoy this little. Uh, these are all hand drawn by yours truly. Terrible drawings. Not an artist, but little paper map style. Um, I I do think though this is another area where, given some time and maybe the right skill set, there's definitely room for improvement. So I'd love to be able to take, probably not this, because again, this is my terrible hand drawn mountains and hills and trees and wetlands, but I'd love to be able to take this, something like this, but better, and translate it up to those higher resolutions so that it's filling in and determining how to fill in at those higher resolutions. Because right now, when I go to a higher resolution map and I do a paper map, it's the same white, but it has a black outline, and there's no drawings on it, no icons on it. Um, so I would love to be able. I'm gonna go ahead and show that. Yeah, so nothing drawn in. Um, I'd love to be able to take that other approach where you have those icons drawn in, and be able to draw them in on these larger maps. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess you could do kind of larger stylistic icons, or you might be able to do those small icons and it might still look okay. Not sure on that front yet. The only thing, depending on the scaling and the size of the icons, you need to avoid running out over the coast or running into things. So that's part of the technical headache in trying to figure out how to implement that. And I've tried, I know I don't know what just happened. I haven't seen that before. My map has escaped. Let's see. There we go. I guess oh, there you go. You're seeing bugs in real time. My map is escaping off the edge and going into this side area. but when you go back to the wrap, it's fine. So UI is definitely something that I'm looking into work on too. Somebody very early on did a big revamp of the UI, but I think there's things like just having these as draggable and not minimizable that are really frustrating. Um, Generally, I like the styling that they did. I like the menu approach that they did, and try because earlier it was just overwhelming. But one of the things that I want to work on in the future is trying to do some kind of revamp of that UI. Maybe put things into a kind of like a Windows type menu up here at the top that you can just click on. Maybe when you're working on the map itself, when you're not actually in the title mode, that you wouldn't have this area right here, which is really only for editing titles. So, when I click on the title map and say I want to draw a new empire, I draw, let's see, the Amble Empire. I've got a brush of 1 here, so it's really not going to show much, but let me get a bigger brush. There we go. Draw on that empire. Then the title will show up over here, but otherwise the space is really wasted, right? And so you could imagine that that only shows up when you click on the title map, and that's the only time that you work through it. The other thing I've thought about doing is some kind of like almost a chronological approach to creating a map, right? Or a iterative approach. So you could, when you first jump into the generator, maybe you work on the height map, and then you go from there to whatever the next level of map is, and then finally at the end you could do the title map, right? I've heard people say, "Hey, I've been working on my elevation, and all of a sudden I've accidentally screwed up all of my terrain." I'm pulling up the terrain map here. A little bit of a wait. Or maybe they said they clicked on terrain and it broke the whole generator. I don't know. There we go. So, they're working on terrain and they switch to something else and it screws everything up. Something I would love to avoid, but I don't know if people would be into that, if there's actually a need to redo that approach so that you have that iterative approach, or if people can just work their way through it. Show some map work here. I do like, how with the elevation unevenly distributed, how as you're working on increases of elevation, just how well it shows up easily without having to do any kind of manual drawing. I usually work in 4096 by 2048. I find that's pretty good performance. The lower resolution maps are fun too, but here's 2048 by 1024. Also does an okay job. I think the icons here on the menu are pretty terrible to look at. They hurt my eyes, honestly. I'm getting older, I guess, and my eyesight is not as good as it used to be, and these are way too small. Another possibility with that iterative approach is that you really don't need all of those icons on each level, right? So if you're only dealing with elevations at one point and you say you bring up the relief, you can switch back and forth between the relief map and the height map to begin with. Then that might be able to simplify the UI. And then if you when you go to the next, maybe you're dealing with the climate, right? And so you want to be able to generate winds and currents and your coping classifications and your terrains. And so maybe that's the next level. And at each stage you have a UI that's specifically tailored to that. And then maybe you can just go back and forth between the stages, but each stage you don't have that possibility of overriding what you're not meaning to. which might just be something that needs to be more intuitive about the way the brushes are selected and that brushes are indicated. I did add, let's see, you can see what brush you're on now up here in the top left, which might help. Yeah, thanks, KZ. Thanks for joining in. Let's see here. I'm going to go through and do some more erosion on this one. Let's say I'll give it a size of 50. Actually, I think that's going to be too small here. I'm going to zoom in. I think 50 is probably too small for this area that I'm working on. Go to 150. And just, you know, a little goes a long way on the erosion brush. I'll click here. You can see, as long as you just maybe click once, everything looks okay. I did have both erosion and deposition built in, and it was cool, and it was more realistic, but it also really made your map super messy really fast with just these large areas of deposition coming down from when you have erosion features here, like at the mountains. Just maybe I'll return to it again in the future, but as is, it looked really terrible. So I did scrap that probably a month, 2 months ago. But this erosion brush, I think does a pretty good job. Now, if you do overkill with the erosion brush, I'll show what that looks like. Let me zoom out. I'm just going to make this island. Let's see. I'll make this island over here. Just, you know, I know it looks terrible, but I'm just trying to show off the erosion brush here. So again, trying to show off what doing overkill in the erosion brush looks like. I'm just going to hold it down for a little bit here. You can see pretty quickly it starts to look really dumb. So you really need to take a tailored approach to the erosion brush. And if you're trying to clean up, say, the edges of a coastline, I find that the lower elevation brush actually works a lot better. And I'll just drop it down to, say, 30, and then bring that power down to, say, 4. And then just come in along that coastline, and that might even be too much. Might need to do 2 on that power. Coming along the coastline, and you can kind of get some more realistic looking coastlines. Not great, but you know, if you work on it long enough, I'm just kind of running over it really quickly here. You can get an okay look to your coastlines. Now again, that's kind of what you're seeing here is some of just the problems of the erosion brush. If you go back over and instead of doing the erosion brush, say I just raise the elevation up in this other area. Make this a bigger brush. I'm raising this up. Actually, why don't we just to show this off, why don't we just set the brush power, if you set the brush power to absolute and then set it to 38, that's sea level basically. So I can go back over and just make this all one big continent here. And then if I go back and do my drop elevation brush again, I'm going to take it off of absolute. Then you can kind of do this tailored cutting of the coastline.